Welcome to Motivation Local, a podcast where we discuss how place impacts identity. All of this made possible with support from TELUS Story Hive. Lived experience not only shapes how people view a community, but also how they view themselves. The sum of these experiences and memories form a narrative about a community. It's at the intersection of this that we seek to explore how these experiences and memories shape individuals. How has their community motivated them? And perhaps how have they motivated their community? I'm Corey Sadlemyer, host of Motivation Local. Our focus this season will be my hometown, Medicine Hat, Alberta. Through a collection of stories, our goal will be to generate an informative sketch about Medicine Hat through the eyes of a small sample of its members. Some of our guests will be born and raised here, some will be former residents that have ventured off to new places, and some will be people who have come to call Medicine Hat home. Each will provide their own reflections on place and identity. Our hope is that this provides you with time to reflect on your hometown, wherever you live. In a story about place, I would be remiss to not acknowledge the land that inspires this show. This coolly carved corridor that intersects what has become Treaty 7 and Treaty 4 land, a meeting place for the Blackfoot and the Cree for centuries, and the home of the Métis as well. Lastly, I would like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my role at Medicine Hat Public School Division. It is, however, about celebrating the community in which I live and work in, and as with any small community, there will be an intersection of guests and roles that reference my work with the school division. Our guest today is Trevor Moore. Trevor is a well-known hatter, whether you've met him at the golf course as an entertainer or as an MC, maybe as a coach or a magician, and lately, most likely in the world of personal development. Trevor's insights and a penchant for sharing while being vulnerable are qualities that make people seek him out, and why I'm so excited to have him on our show today. So, we go way back.
Yeah.
Some earlier days. Well, you were younger for sure.
Well, you would have still been in high school.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would have been, I think I started golfing in grade 6 and sort of through the roundabout connected with you when I was like probably in grade 6 or 7 at the golf course. And then as that would be the time I went to school with your brother.
Yeah.
And then that's when all dots got connected. Yeah. And then working at the golf course and junior program stuff, both playing and you had your junior program camps and things like that. So yeah, it's been a long time. I think you actually worked at the shop a couple of years as well.
Yeah. I think actually we overlapped.
Yep.
A little bit.
I know we worked a year or two for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember how long it was there, but
good old days, Clint Schmaltz.
Yep. Clint Schmaltz, Chad Odell. It was there was quite a crew back then.
Yeah. BJ.
Yes. Billy Bruce. Wow. There's a blast from the past. I have not heard of, I see his mom every now and again. She always tells me she's going to drop off a pie. Yeah. Because she used to always bring pies back by the back shop when we were kids and drop stuff off. But I see her every now and again. I haven't seen Billy in years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know what he's up to.
Yeah. I see my brother, and he'd maybe be the most likely to stay in touch with BJ, but
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. That would be the tightest connection of the crew, I would think.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I'll have to ask him sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Chad Odell's in Atlanta.
Right.
Yeah. Doing Chad Odell things.
He was a good guy and an interesting duck for sure.
He was. Yeah. We always said he was the kind of guy that could take a story, turn an AM FM radio into 60-inch plasma TV over the course of 3 sentences. Like it was, the story went from just boring to amazing before you knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a storyteller.
That's awesome. So as we planned for this, I was reminded that you weren't originally a hatter.
Yes.
And you had a funny story, and I thought it'd be a fun place to start about how your family ended up in Medicine Hat.
Yeah. It's born in the Okanagan, beautiful Vernon, BC. My dad was a startup manager for Woolworths at the time, so he would bounce all over Canada, going in, starting up a new Woolworths store. They would hand it over to the manager. He would move down the road, start up the next store. And that was kind of his existence until I kind of got into kindergarten. That's when I was in Vernon, when I was born there. At that time, his family was in Medicine Hat. My mom's family was in Lloydminster. They were kind of done with the traveling road show and decided it was time to move closer back to family. So they ended up in Brooks. We spent 2 years in Brooks. And that was sort of it. We were moving back this way. And then as luck would have it, through this sort of chaotic world of the mortgage stuff that went crazy in the 80s, There was a company in town who had an opportunity to sell us a home here. It was by accident because they had built outside of the Brooks area and they weren't supposed to. And it didn't fit into their inventory, and the bank asked for an inventory of their assets. So they were kind of concerned, and turned out it was the exact same home I lived in Brooks.
Yeah.
It was built here, and they got our family to move here and take this home so they could list the Brooks home on the assets books and everything be fine with the bank. So yeah, kind of a strange story. We ended up here sort of by accident, but sort of by design, right? They wanted to get back to this way to be closer to family, and that's sort of the story that got me here. I still consider Vernon home. Like, even though I left, I mean, I was in kindergarten, but it's just, it's a place I go back to. It's a place I feel, I don't know why. I don't know why. Most of my life has been in Medicine Hat, but Vernon still feels like home to me in some respects. Weirdly, I don't know why. Because Medicine Hat has been my formative years. It's been my career. It's been all my schooling. But yeah, that was sort of a strange way to get here. But we got here. It was definitely a shock moving from the Okanagan as a kindergarten kid, moving in the dark and driving into Brooks and asking, what is that smell? And my parents said, that's Brooks. So where are we moving? They said, Brooks. That was a shock. And then woke up the next morning, looked out the window and saw no mountains or streams or trees.
Wow.
It was culture shock for a BC kid who had not known anything but forest and trees.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite memories of Vernon?
Oh man, you know what? I don't know if I have any specific favorite memories. I mean, I like, there was the place called the Peanut Pool. That was a big one in Vernon. Every young kid that lived in our side of town knew about the Peanut Pool. It was a little sort of splash park in the area. It was about a couple blocks from our house. I remember spending summers there. Lots of time on the beach, I think, was the things I remember most. Because I was pretty young, I don't have a ton of memories. Most of my memories of Vernon would come from trips going back. Right. As I was older. So nothing really that jumps out at me, but yeah, I guess just, I've always probably enjoyed the mountains, the trees, right? I know I love getting to Banff. I love getting to Canmore. I love that type of stuff. And that's probably my biggest memory is just the ecosystem, if you will. Yeah. There's always something to do.
I remember you telling me a story. I don't know why this just came to me about you. And I think maybe it was Greg, and it was one of your brothers, and you guys went golfing in the mountains, and the pins were red.
Yes.
And the flags were red.
Yes.
And
yes.
the backdrops were green.
Yeah. Being a colorblind kid, it's funny. I have two really good stories about my brothers. The one being, because red flags against the green backdrop, being colorblind, you can't see them at all. I could not tell you where the flags were. Was a shocking thing, being colorblind. But the other one that was really kind of funny was, any golfers that would listen would understand, sort of, let me build the story up, but standing on a dogleg right tee box, where you can only see to the edge of the tree line on the right, and it bends. Like, I don't know what's around the corner. And I used to be just like terrified of bears, like not just a little bit of a phobia, like horrible, right? And my brother, who's in Calgary, is an officer, and he convinced me, let's go play in Canmore. And he decided, he said, I'll bring my gun, like, do whatever we need to. He had pepper spray, everything. He said, we're good to go. And I was standing on the tee box, ready to hit my tee shot around the corner. My brother's on the left side of the tee box. He can see clear around the bend. And I'm setting up to hit my tee shot. And my brother goes, uh-oh. I have no idea what he's looking at. And then I see a guy running back towards the tee box, like not running, like running. And I have no idea what's chasing him. Like, my mind is going a million different directions, thinking it's a bear. But turned out he was on the course illegally, and the marshal was chasing him. But I thought he was running from a bear. And I just about died right there. I thought that was it. There was a bear coming around the corner. I didn't know where I was going.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered a bear on the course?
Not on the golf course, no. Couple out in Banff camping and that kind of stuff, but never anything on the golf course. Today, it's interesting. I'm not as scared of bears. I did a lot of research and sort of armed myself with how to manage myself in bear country and how to mitigate risks. So I'm not as scared of them anymore. Spend a lot of time in the mountains now and do some hiking and biking and would happily golf, but I've never in the mountains, but I've never ran into one on the golf course.
I've got a picture for you afterwards. So I think I've got 3 bear encounters on a course, all at Waterton.
Yep.
Every year. And in this photo, and I can pop it up when I show this, the bear, he's just come out of we've walked off the 10th green. The bear has just come out of the trees. He comes up to the pin, grabs onto the pin, puts the flag in his mouth, pulls it back, lays down, and then the flag just goes
back and forth. Love it.
And we're 15 feet away from him. And he just ignored us and went on away. And I'm glad I had a really fast cart got out of there. But yeah.
Yeah, they're terrifying animals. It's funny because I read a book. One of the things that helped me get over my bear phobia, I was steered towards a book, and I can't remember the name of the author or the book, but he's from U of C. He's one of the world's foremost experts on bear behavior, and he's researched like a police, like homicide detective. Like he has gone through all the information and debrief for any bear attack that has gone on to figure out like what situationally may have caused it, where it was, what could have been done differently. Like really great. And I picked up the book in Waterton actually because we got to Waterton and my wife and I didn't want to do much because of the bears. She's like, maybe. And they had the book in the gas station, so I bought it and thumbed open just randomly to the first page, like in the middle of the book somewhere, and it's like, as Trevor ran as fast as he could down the path, it's like, okay, maybe the book's for me.
He knew you well.
Knew me well, yeah. So, but yeah, I've since conquered my bear phobia.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Polar bears are my thing now, but I don't have to worry about those here.
You don't have to worry. No. So how about what's your earliest memory of the hat?
Earliest memory of the hat? Oh man, beyond sandflies. You know what? Early memories in Medicine Hat. I mean, obviously spending a lot of time on the golf course as a kid was a big one. Playing hockey, community-wise, we used to spend tons of time at Crestwood Pool in the summers. I remember lots of time in Kincooley. Tobogganing in Kincooley was a big one when I was little. Those kind of things. That's some of my earliest stuff. More of my memories of Medicine Hat would be from older, right? As I got, I mean, as I think I took for granted Medicine Hat's, glow when I was young.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Then you get older and have kids and you start to really realize it's a great city. And I have so many more memories of my life as a young adult in Medicine Hat than I do younger, because I was probably blissfully unaware, right? Just enjoying riding my bike down the streets and playing in the sprinklers, right? Yeah. And I do remember the excessive heat in the summers. That was but I didn't mind that as a kid. Yeah.
Were you ever, because I would have had a lot of friends that were you grew up in your hometown and you just desperately want to leave. Was that ever you?
No, not really. I mean, I thought about leaving Medicine Hat at one point in time. I was older. I mean, by that point in time, my wife and we already had a child, and it was just, maybe from a business perspective, was Calgary an answer? With some investigation, it wasn't the opportunity I wanted it to be, and just really got comfortable with being here. I was not one of those people. I know a lot of my friends went to college, university, and they're like, I can't wait to go, and I'm never coming back. And many of them end up back. Yeah. You get to that point in time where, when life settles down and the fast pace of the big city isn't kind of hitting it for them. So I never really had that moment where I wanted to leave. There was a time that I was called to leave, maybe business-wise, but like I said, there's too many great things in the city, right? It's the perfect size city. It's got everything you need and nothing that you don't, really. No traffic jams.
I was with a friend recently, Sean Horvath. It was probably about 3 months ago, and we were talking about bucket list things, and he didn't have a bucket list. He lives in Calgary. He's got a place in Radium. He's got a place down south. And I said, so you got to have something that you wish you could always do. He goes, well, maybe move back to the Hat. I was like, I don't think you understand bucket lists.
It can go deeper than that. Yeah. That's funny. I have some friends that didn't move back, and I'm surprised they didn't. I thought for sure they would move back, but I mean, so many of my friends from college are here nowadays, right? In so many different industries and professionals. We were talking earlier about a friend, Chad Odell, and he wasn't from Medicine Hat. He had the most eclectic mix of background history from South Africa to England to Alabama and to Medicine Hat, and went through high school with him. And he moved away, obviously, after high school into college, university, and has never come back, but he's always talked about wanting to come back and thought he'd love it here. It's an interesting city. There's a lot of attraction, I think, to Medicine Hat. You look at going away. I mean, it's one of those, sometimes, why do we go away in the summer? We got such beautiful summers, right? I mean, some people go away and it's like, well, we have it here, like we got a good place too. And such a great place, right? With Mavericks games and remember back in the days when it was all Blue Jays games, but there's always been something going on here, and it's just a great city. Yeah.
So you've got a winding career path.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
100%. Yeah.
We started a little bit at the golf thing.
Yeah. Let me try to give you the Cole's notes here so it doesn't turn into a podcast series. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I was your typical Canadian kid, right? I was a hockey player in the winter. Fell in love with golf at the end of elementary school, and it sort of became my passion. It took over from hockey, and it eventually became my sport of choice, and eventually became a member of the PGA of Canada. Loved the idea of being a golf pro. As I got closer to finishing my apprenticeship and getting my exams done and playing tests done, I realized that I wasn't really into some of the stuff that golf professionals have to do, right? And I wasn't into booking tournaments and those types of things. I realized that teaching and coaching was probably the avenue I was best suited for. So I started my own teaching and coaching academy in 2000, taught full time, did some collegiate coaching in that time as well. About 24 years, I think I worked in the golf industry. On the sidelines with that, obviously being in Canada, we have a bit of an off season. So I was able to fill that with my second hobby, turning it into a business, which was being a stand-up comedy magician, and was blessed to turn that into a business and do some amazing things in a lot of fun places and meet a lot of great people and do a lot of fun stuff. And then that sort of migrated into, and COVID was sort of I don't know if it was the catalyst. It was maybe the final straw that broke the camel's back, where it was, at that time I was speaking a little bit. I was coaching a little bit in the golf realm and had some of my clients that were coming to the sessions, but not even bringing their golf bag. They were just wanting to sit in the clubhouse and walk through some things to help shape mindsets. So that's when I started to realize that maybe I had some skills that were I was utilizing them in golf, but they weren't golf specific, and migrated into the mindset coaching or life coaching and the keynote speaking, which is sort of the primary piece I do now. Obviously, with that, naturally, a great fit is just a little bit of emceeing on the side. I do a lot of corporate events and conferences and a little emceeing there. I don't really do much in the golf world anymore. I do work with some golfers, but it's all on the mindset side, no technical stuff anymore. And I don't really perform a lot of headline shows in the magic and comedy world anymore. I do a few sort of guest appearances, if you will, and sometimes in my emceeing and hosting, I will slide in a bit here or there when requested. But not a lot of that. So it's primarily speaking and coaching today. Really is sort of that's my day. Yeah.
I kind of got to be there at the start. I can remember you at the counter in the pro shop doing
rain delays,
doing some tricks, and going like those would be great to take to a party because you could fool people quite easily.
It's funny because I have so many people. There was two places that the magic showed up really early in my life, and one was on the hockey bus. Right when I played hockey, we didn't have DVD players and VCRs in the bus back then, so I killed the time by reading card trick books on the way out, and way home from the road trip, I'd go back to the table at the back with the card players and show some magic. And that's sort of where it kind of went from there into the years I coached hockey as well. And then the other one was the golf course. Yeah, the frost delays, the rain delays, hanging out in the clubhouse, and there's always shenanigans going on the golf course anyway. So it was a perfect fit. Yeah, we'd grab the cards and have some fun with it. It's been a blessing. The hobby itself was something I never ever imagined in a million years that would become something I would ever be able to turn into a business. Never even had any vision for that until it started to happen, as bizarre as it was. But most people that know me were sort of surprised to see me in that realm because it's a little bit more boisterous than I am. I'm a little bit quieter and a little bit more shy than that, but it's a neat opportunity. I really enjoyed it. It allowed me to tap my alter ego, right? Get to that side where, use my humor and be myself a little bit. And I really enjoyed it. I miss not doing shows, but I don't miss the stress of doing shows. It got to be a little stressful at times, and I don't miss that aspect, but I do miss the interaction and the fun and the moments, and the magic was fun. Yeah, it's been an interesting one.
I really admired that you took probably the best part about being a golf pro, which was teaching people how to golf, because I got to do a little bit of that myself, and really that's why I went into education, because I didn't like selling shirts.
Yeah.
The industry was tough. Like if you were projecting ahead, if you were going to be a professional and run your own shop, there weren't as many golf courses opening as there were people that wanted to apprentice and do that work. So that entrepreneurial drive that you had in a variety of ways, but obviously starting with the Advantage Golf, where do you think that came from?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I look back at it and I wonder where that sort of bug came in. Obviously, my dad being a manager in a retail franchise, had obviously some sales and those types of skills, but I wouldn't call that necessarily entrepreneurial per se, right? I don't know where the entrepreneurship came into it. I think at the end of the day, my personality probably fit for it. You know what I mean? It was just, I think my personality really sort of worked well for it. I realized early on, like you were talking about the different things in the golf industry. I initially thought I would be like every other golf pro and have a club and be a head pro. And as bizarre as it is, the story that that really, and it didn't make any sense to me at the time, but it made sense to me much later on, which is so often the case when people get into careers. They don't realize the dysfunction in a career until they get out of it. And part of the application process to the PGA of Canada was having 2 letters of recommendation from existing head pros and to interview those 2 head pros. And the first head pro I interviewed, the first question I asked him was, what was his goal when he got into the industry? And just stone-faced said, my goal was to leave the industry married to the same woman I was when I got into the industry. Me being 20 at the time, being like, I'm not even sure what that means.
Yeah.
Clearly now I do. It's a tough, intense world, and it's
divorce rates.
High divorce rates. Yeah. You see other, addiction issues. You see other challenges, and not to suggest that golf is the only industry that it's in, but it's there. It is, and as a golf pro, you spend intense time working 6 months a year. The reacclimation process, getting back home to your family in the winter is challenging, and you don't take summer vacation with your kids. That's the best time of the year to have off. So to me, the choice was, it was sort of my wife's calling, or to me, was when she said, why do you have to do it like everybody else? And I said, well, that's the road forward. And she said, well, why is it? Like, what do you like to do? And we really brainstormed, right? And I realized there was sort of, there was 3 things that made me unique. And one was my ability to play the game. So it was one of those, well, do you want to be a playing professional? I'm not naive enough to believe that I have any of those skills to make that a career. So that was a non-interest to me. But then it was really the one that I realized made me sort of unique, was that I had the ability to communicate the game and to share it with people. And so that sort of, my wife was probably the biggest push into that entrepreneurial side, right? She's kind of got that spirit, and she sort of really let me see that the world could be different. And so she helped me really sort of reshape that career in a way that it was different. At the time, there wasn't a lot of teaching pros, right? It wasn't a thing. I mean, I had some good friends in the industry that told me it was going to be occupational suicide. Nobody would ever hire me after I stepped away from the mold. And you know what? Didn't matter. From coaching at the college to running summer camps to, working with, tons of different players and privately in groups. And it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And I think, that was obviously the first step into entrepreneurship for me, was that coaching academy. But I liked it. I liked the freedom. I liked the flexibility of it. I liked that it allowed me to, it allowed me to be myself, I think, was the biggest thing, right? I think sometimes when you're an employee, you have to fit into the mold of above, right? This is where we are. And you know what? I was social, had a sense of humor, those types of things. And I like to use those. And I thought those were important skill sets to keep going forward. But my wife was probably the biggest push entrepreneurial for me. She sort of, her dad had started, he had passed away just after we started dating, but he was in the process of starting a business. So she was a little bit more around the entrepreneurial world than I was. I lived in that world where it was like, find a job with a pension and benefits and work your 25 and get out. That's just what you do. Yeah. That was sort of the world I came from. But boy, am I glad I found entrepreneurship.
And could you ever have imagined like where you would be now?
No, not at all. I honestly, starting the coaching academy for me, I honestly viewed as a stopgap measure. It was like, okay, well, if I can get through, because I left in the fall at the golf course, resigned, where I was an assistant pro. At that time, there was really no options. There was a driving range starting in town. So I was like, well, let's go teach some lessons. And I kind of thought, it's going to be half decent, but it'll be one of those things. It'll be a stopgap measure till I can find where I want to go and what I want to do. And I fell in love with it. Just completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with, with interacting with people. I mean, you're a teacher in any capacity, anybody that educates or informs, or you just, that look in someone's face when they get it, or they understand in a way they hadn't before. And once you get that sort of addiction, it's one of those, I want to keep going in that realm. So I didn't ever see myself doing that. Even up until 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't even see myself, really as a keynote speaker or a mindset coach, working outside of the golf realm. I always felt that I was a golf pro and my skill set was very much golf, but it was that moment where I really started to analyze the clients that were coming in. And like I said, clients were coming without their golf bag, and they were like, I just need to talk. Like, I practiced last night. I want to throw my clubs away. And we're like, okay. So we were helping them find perspective. And that was sort of the moment where I realized that I had a skill set that could be repurposed. It really wasn't just golf. It was about humans. It was about, personalities, habit development, confidence building, all those types of things. And no, I could have never seen it go this way. Couldn't have ever in a million years have managed it, imagined this or mapped it out to be this way. It's sort of ebbed and flowed and got here, but you couldn't have seen this happen at all.
And how about the keynote stuff? Like, were you extrovert kid out there?
No, I'm super introverted. That's the funny thing. Like I am so introverted on the inside. I spend a lot of time alone. I like to be by myself, quiet. I really energize that way. I love people, but I really just am very introverted, which is interesting to think that I could be on stage being a comedy magician, which is a very extroverted world. But the keynote speaking, I didn't fathom that would happen for me either. I really didn't think that was a direction for me, but it sort of just became a natural. I mean, I've started to embrace, I think the biggest thing for me, professional growth is never lapped by your personal growth. And I think the biggest thing for me in the last sort of, 6-8 years has been that I've embraced the fact that I do own a skill set, and that is the ability to communicate. And it's allowed me to get more comfortable with that keynote speaking. But I could, if you would have told me I was going to be a keynote speaker, I would have said, you're off your rocker. It's just not happening.
It's interesting, as you make that statement, embraced this skill set that I have, that lots of us actually don't do that, right? Like we don't look at what are our strengths. Like we'll often make goals based on, I see deficit X, I see deficit Y, I see deficit Z. I got to work on those things. Rather than doing an inventory and going, I'm really good at this thing. I'm gonna try to leverage that.
Yeah, it is a tough challenge, right? And it's something I work with my clients all the time, right? Is that sort of belief in yourself and acceptance of who you are, right? And really accepting who you are. Going to my magic and comedy days, like one of the hardest things to get into stand-up magic and comedy is that to find your character on stage. And the biggest thing you can do is be you. And that was a good experience for me because it taught me a couple of things. One, that the hardest character you ever play in your life is yourself. When you are consciously involved trying to be more of you, it's hard. Like you overdo it or you underdo it. Like it's hard to be you. So really kind of getting out of your own way and just sort of letting things shine. And it took me a long time. It took me a lot of work to really get comfortable and confident that I had this skill set and see past some of those things. And it's a work in progress, right? You always have those moments where you're like, well, that didn't quite go as I'd hoped, but okay. But yeah, embracing it's huge, right? Coming to that acceptance is such a big piece for us in every capacity. If we can accept and come to some acceptance of who we are. I think one of the things, I had a conversation with a guy one time. It was, we tend to hide our weaknesses rather than show our strengths, right? Like we tend to, try to keep things secret, and it's painful. Even if you've ever kept a secret, like a surprise birthday party, right? It's a great secret. That's painful for the last week for everybody involved because you're second guessing everything you say. You're second guessing everything you did. You realize you talked in past tense. You included we when it should have been I. Like you're second. It's horrible. It's an awful experience, even though it's a good thing. And when we live our life trying to hide our shortcomings, do you know what I mean? Rather than just accepting who we are and living with those and allowing those to be seen, but really emphasizing our strengths, it changes everything when we get there. But once you sort of realize to let go of some of those weaknesses and not hide them, you realize, you know what, the world or my mind can't hold them against me anymore. When we just call them what they are. I jokingly, my bio have that I'm a horrible speller.
I saw how you spelled horrible.
I spell it wrong, right? Because it's one of those, I have to say, I thought for a long time, if you look at my slide deck and even my keynotes, there's very few words. Why? Because I'm terrified of my spelling ability. And I'm scared to mess things up. But now there's multiple reasons I don't use words in my slides, which are better than that. But yeah, it's amazing how we struggle to accept and acknowledge what our strengths are. And the hard part is seeing ourselves in a different mold, right? Like it took a long time to not see myself as a golf pro or a comedy magician. Other people were already seeing me that way. I wasn't seeing myself that way. And it was kind of a weird process, but it's a big one, right? We have to come to some acceptance, and it's not always easy.
So you said a word in there. You said struggle, and you've got a pretty solid social media presence, and people can look you up and see things with you. And you did a lot of work for our community in the past few years to support that struggle. Can we talk a little bit about the mental health?
Yeah, 100%. I make no secret of the fact that I do manage my mental health on a daily basis. I mean, I was formally diagnosed in 2000 with depression, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder. I manage them quite well. Still have moments where they rear their ugly head, for sure. I knew well before 2000 something wasn't quite right, but that was also back in the era where you just, you have nothing to complain about. Just toughen up and go forward. Yeah, right. And so it was 2000 that I got a formal diagnosis, and then on the other side, I've gone through a 12-year battle of chronic pain. Chronic pain and depression just go hand in hand. They ride sidecar with one another. And then late in life, I was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, which was a mind-blowing thing for me to find. But changed everything. I suddenly understood myself in a way I didn't before. I really realized things about myself that frustrated me before,
Yeah.
but I'm passionate about it. I just think that was part of the reason where keynote speaking and coaching became a big one for me. Is I'm a huge believer that any coach or teacher or mentor who is very heart-centered often gets into the industry they're in, and their philosophies are built around themselves in the sense that there's a moment in my life where I felt the cracks and I want to be there to catch everyone else so that they don't feel alone and struggle in that moment. And that was sort of the big push for me into that mental health world, was just starting to become more vocal about the fact that it's okay to struggle. Many people do. We don't have to do it in silence, and there are ways around it. And I was lucky enough to be talking to my pain specialist, which was a big one for me, where he said that, again, this was sort of the embracing the skills I had. He said, you don't fit the mold in people's eyes of what depression looks like and what chronic pain look like. You are very articulate and you can speak, and you have the ability to be the voice for the people who cannot muster the words to explain what happens.
Yeah.
And that was important to me. When I heard that from my pain doctor, I really started to really, vocalize that a lot more and really get more about it, and do a lot of work with Canadian Mental Health and various other organizations. And yeah, I'm really passionate about mental health, and COVID was a big one for so many people. I'm blessed in the fact that I was able to navigate some of these things before COVID hit. For some people, COVID was the realization or the moment that they started to understand these things were part of their world. And it was a challenge for them. I was lucky enough to have gone through some stuff before that COVID didn't get to me as badly as it did others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm passionate about it, and just think it's really important that we share that, right? I mean, we're all human. I mean, depression is, it's your kindergarten teacher. Depression is your pharmacist. Depression is your motivational speaker. I mean, mental health challenges are everywhere.
Yeah, we have no clue, right?
No, not at all.
In my work, I would get to meet all sorts of mental health specialists and learn all about supporting people with their mental health in the same way that we have physical health, right?
Yep.
But for myself, it was like, I can lock that in a box, right? I can put that in this container, or I can put that in this container, and that tough phone call or whatever that is, that doesn't affect me.
Yep.
And then one day my body disagreed.
Yeah.
And I went through 3 months of bizarro world where clearly something was physically wrong with me, except that nothing was physically wrong with me. And I think the spiral that creates in your head just was a huge wake up call for me to have a deep appreciation for the analogy that kept coming to me is, particularly what the community was going through at right around that same time, was like, I can picture this baseball field where you get out to the warning track, and at the end of the warning track, it just kind of falls off the end of the world. Yeah. And not that I was there, but I felt like I had gone out to the warning track and I'd met the people that were out there, and I went, "Oh, I can get it. I can get why people don't know what to do. Can't get past the moment."
For sure. I think the quote is Dr. Seuss, and I could be completely wrong. Everybody can look that one up to make sure I am wrong, but I'm pretty sure I am. But it's something like, to those that get it, no explanation is necessary. To those that don't, none would ever suffice. And it completely is, to me, with the mental health world, right? I know there's this frustration where, people who struggle with their mental health or have loved ones that do, even if you see it secondary, it's still a pretty impactful thing to see. Yeah. And there's that sort of, when you talk to people and they sort of give you responses like, well, just be positive. And, you have to look at the good things in your life. You've got a job, you got a home, you got a healthy family, you're healthy. And I know what they're trying to do. They're just uncomfortable with the conversation. But the reality is, it's one of those, I used to get frustrated with that conversation, and I know a lot of people do, but to me, it's more a case of, I'm happy they don't get it. The fact they don't get it means it has never impacted their inner circle. Yeah. And that's okay. I don't need to enlighten them on that. I don't know if I ever could, right? Until you see it, it's hard to understand, right? How you can be held hostage by your own brain. Yeah. How your own brain can really convince you of just about anything. And at the end of the day, reality is often kinder than our own imagination, right? Yeah. And the mental health challenges, and most people have a moment where they get there, right? There's always a change in your life, whether it's a career change, whether it's retirement, a financial challenge, a mental health or a physical health problem. It can be, relationship changes. It can be just about anything, moving, all these things can set people off. And until they have that moment, they don't really understand the moment.
Yeah.
And when you see it and when you know it, it's bizarre to think of. And when you see people, there's so many people out there that struggle. I think the thing that was really interesting to me is when I started to get comfortable being vulnerable to share my message and my story a little bit and be open about it and really just make it a casual conversation, I started to see more people that could relate.
Yeah.
And it's, it's that you get the new shoes and you don't see them until you get the new shoes. And then everybody seems to have those shoes, right? It's once you see it and you acknowledge it and it's there, now you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And really seeing it. And that's a big thing, to share it and see it and realize we're not alone and realize it's pretty normal, right? We try to normalize it in our house. It's like, I go to a family doctor for a physical once a year. I get my eyes checked once a year and my teeth checked once a year. Why am I not going to a psychologist or psychiatrist once a year, whether I'm feeling good or not?
Right.
Because even if my teeth don't hurt, I still go to the dentist. And even if I don't feel sick, I still go for my annual physical.
Yeah.
There just needs to be a checkup, right? And that's okay. And really trying to normalize that has been something that, we've tried to do in our home. I mean, obviously there is still work to be done societally with it, but I think we're making large gains. But boy, we have a long way to go because the need for it is huge.
Well, so I'm looking here. I had a quote that you had on, it's all spelled correctly on your website, about overwhelmed and exhausted adults.
Yeah.
And I've thrown this out to a couple of friends, where I wonder what is the sweet spot in life? Because I would see people who, I thought things were going great for them, or my memory of them was they had it all, and then suddenly something presents itself, and that would be probably for more people, more than 50% of the people I know, where life has handed something to them, and they're struggling to deal with that. And yeah, it's fascinating to me.
It is. I talk about that in my keynote. Like the three things that I really talk about when I speak. There's the three things I talk about at the beginning to introduce myself, and the one is that I'm a mental health advocate, and the fact that I share that is to let them know that I understand how easy it is to be held hostage by our brain. And I talk about my chronic pain journey, which came on in the snap of a finger, middle of the night. When I went to bed, nothing was wrong in my world. Everything was fine. I'd never experienced chronic pain. I had not injured myself. I had no moment. It just became this condition that showed up in the middle of the night, and I was in chronic pain. And it took us 9 years to find a diagnosis. Once we found a diagnosis, which was complex regional pain syndrome, that changed because we had a strategy to manage the pain. But I tell people about that story because at the end of the day, the night I went to bed, I was active. I had a business. I was energetic. I loved life. Everything was great. My business was going well. Like everything, I was doing everything I thought I needed to do. Like I was doing everything I'm supposed to take control of in my world. And sometimes we can be blindsided by things completely out of our control. As much as we want to believe we're in control, we're not. And it's really not, life is not about, lack of adversity. It's just having a healthier relationship with the adversity because it's there. To face it and embrace it is a challenge for people. And for a lot of people, I know COVID was a big one for a lot of people in the sense that they use alternative scenarios, right? That's where addictions come in. People are starting to medicate themselves through some of this discomfort in other ways. And as soon as things were shut down in COVID, they lost their coping mechanisms. Everything fell apart, right? Yeah. But it's also the body keeps score. I think that's the biggest thing is when I think about depression and anxiety, people thinking. It's like, oh man, like I'm nauseous. I struggle to breathe, my heart, like the physical symptoms are every bit as much as the mental symptoms. And people don't often see that. And the body keeps score, right? Like you were saying, you can sort of repress or compartmentalize things in your life, but you know what? Your body knows they're there. And at some point in time, if you don't listen, they're going to sound the alarm and they're going to get you listening. And it's going to be this, for me, it was this awful mess of things that seem so disconnected. It was like, well, that symptom and this symptom is like, these don't add up to anything. Yeah. And after a few conversations with a few doctors and psychiatrists, it became very prevalent that it's like, no, that's very much anxiety. And it's amazing that we're there. We don't see it, right? But the body will often, we forget to address physical stuff thinking there's mental behind it because there can be, right? Yeah. Absolutely can be.
My moment that just really stands out to me, I was talking to a colleague at work, and they disappeared into the background. And so as I was explaining this to a therapist, she said, like, that's a panic attack. She said, you were essentially having a 6-week panic attack. And I'm going, yeah, you're 100% right. But Like
Yeah.
I was still functioning. Like I was walking around doing things. I was
Yeah.
making lunches. I was making coffee. I was trying to work out, trying to do things, but
Yep.
yeah,
You end up in survival mode, right?
Yeah.
You're just literally sort of checking the boxes of adulthood every day. There's no vision beyond today. There's no vision of bigger picture. You're just sort of doing what's in front of you in the moment rather than thinking, what's the big picture? What's the long term? We lose sight of our goals. We often lose sight of personal happiness, joy, hobbies, the things that light us up start to fall away from the sidelines as well. Super common, right? And you see it burnout as well, sort of falls in that same scenario. People that are burnt out have a lot of those things. They struggle to find their motivation. They're wondering where their zest for life went. All stuff that happens because mental health.
So you've experienced it. You've supported people.
Yep.
Who've experienced that. What do you see as keys for perseverance or resilience or becoming optimistic about the future?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I find is that virtually everybody that's struggling in any capacity, there's number one of the gates is a loss of confidence, clarity, and perspective. And in that scenario, we often need to ask for help, and we need to have somebody help us find the perspective and the clarity we need. Clarity is kind of the breeding ground for confidence, right? When you are clear with what you're dealing with and what you're navigating and what your challenge is, things change, right? But I think, so finding that confidence, clarity, and perspective is a place that everybody has to start. They have to get real deep and have deep conversations with themselves and be real honest about what some of this is, what some of this is going on and what they are, and find that sort of perspective. Because when you have that perspective, you can create a clear vision, and then you can create the confidence that comes out of that. And that is a big piece of it. When we look at it, I think the thing that so often happens is people often also try to move through those situations by, I call it overprescribing, where it's like, okay, I'm going to wake up Monday. I'm going to work out 7 days a week. I'm going to do yoga twice a week. I'm going to run every morning. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to drink water. You've overprescribed. Pick one or two small things. Are you sleeping well? Are you going to bed at a consistent time, waking up at a consistent time? Are you drinking your water, which helps you with energy and clarity? Are you doing the little tiny things? Because let's start there. And finding that is that starting point for people where we get right into that beginning piece, because it's a world of information. We can research ourselves to death online and always find more and more things to do, but we have to find fundamental stuff, which is really helping us shape that perspective and our mindset. And that comes from outside in a lot of cases, right? And the other thing that I found that was really important for me in my pain journey, which came from my counselor, was that we live in a world where we're conditioned to believe there's two options. There's optimism or there's pessimism. And the reality is that's just the two polar ends. There's a whole world in the middle of realism. And it's okay to be real, right? Sometimes we look at realism as being pessimistic, and it's not. And I'll use the example of a client that wants to lose 30 pounds, where we have to get them stepping on the scale day one. Now, the number on the scale is not pessimistic. It's not optimistic. It's just realistic. It is
information.
We're just stamping an X on the ground going, we're here, and this is where we're beginning. And, being able to accept and acknowledge some things in our life requires us to have some realism in our world. We tend to try to over-optimize. I mean, we're over-optimistic sometimes. It can be a problem. Pessimistic is never the answer. But being realistic and really just kind of going, okay, well, where am I? What is it that I'm going through right now? And finding I always call it finding our red arrow, right? Like when you think about a map, I use the example all the time. And speaking of my son, went to West End Mall, and
for the kids out there, maps are like, you're talking about like physical maps where you could open them up.
Yeah, not exactly, not on my Google Maps on my phone. But so my son, when we went to West End Mall, like the whole trip for him, we were going to the water park and the amusement park, but for him, he's a big collector, right? Like he liked Star Wars, he loves Marvel stuff. There's a collectible store in the mall, and his buddies had told him about it, and the whole trip was like he just couldn't wait to get to the collectible store. And we got to the mall. First thing he did, walked right up to one of those big mall maps, and I thought he was going to start looking for the collectible store, but instinctively he put his finger on the red arrow that says "You are here," and it made me realize that lost doesn't mean you don't know where you want to go. It means you have not understood where you are. That is what lost means, right? So that's that sort of taking that good, realistic perspective of what's going on in my world and learning to be good and honest with ourselves as a starting point, because that creates some clarity and helps us find the perspective of the things we have control of so that we can take the right approach forward. That's a big one, is that realism. I think for a lot of people, we tend to think optimism or pessimism. It's like, no, realism works too. And it's an important piece of that process. Once you figure out what you're dealing with, optimism is an important thing for the future. But for right now, realism is powerful.
Yeah.
To know where you are, right?
So I'm going to try some mental gymnastics here.
Sure.
So talking about Medicine Hat as a community, its identity.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about and knowing your strengths, but knowing your weaknesses too.
Yep.
Optimism, pessimism, realism, and a community that's, it's dealt with some stuff. We sometimes call ourselves the forgotten corner. What advice would you have for Medicine Hat?
Yeah, that's a great one, right? The forgotten corner is, I've been guilty of using that statement myself, but I look at, like, first of all, if we were thinking of ourselves as real estate agents, right? There's not a real estate agent in the world that's taking you past a house and going to tell you everything that's wrong with the location. We as people in Medicine Hat, we don't get the city we want, we get the city we deserve. And I think it's so important that we as people really start to focus on the amazing things our city has. Does it have mistakes and flaws? Absolutely. But you know what? Nothing's perfect. And really trying to make sure we have just a good, healthy appreciation for the great things our city has, from our path systems to our rec facilities to, minor sports options, to Tigers, to Mavericks, to all of these entertainment options, to theaters. And we've got some great, great stuff. I think that's really important for us to really just, as a community, get better at really emphasizing the things as though we were trying to sell our community to everyone, right? I think that's important, is that we need to focus on the amazing things. Are there some challenges? There are. But you know what? We're also a great sized community. It's a small enough community that you can network, you can get involved. If you are seeing challenges, we are a small enough community, you can be involved. There are committees, associations, groups.
You're just a phone call away,
yeah,
right?
Exactly, yeah. Right? That is exactly it. So it's one of those, you're not just a number in a city the size of Calgary where it doesn't really matter. You can have an impact if you are believing something is able to be better. And I think the idea that one of the things that I see with people in every capacity is that sometimes the idea that things can be better gives us the impression that we're not enough now. And that's a bad place to be. The reality is, getting better as an athlete or in any capacity, getting better is great. You should want to get better. You should want to improve. But to believe you're not enough if you don't make those changes is problematic, right? It's really one of those things where I think as a community, we need to focus on that. Are we the forgotten corner? I mean, you can argue that all you want. I mean, at the end of the day, it still doesn't take away from the fact still pretty blessed.
Maybe I mean, hidden corner.
The hidden corner, yeah. Right? Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Treasure.
Exactly. Yeah. The hidden corner. I like it.
You're talking about real estate. I saw in the last 2 days the 2 craziest real estate signs I've ever seen. Have you seen these?
No.
There's one that says "not haunted," like at the top. And even better, there was one in Riverside. It says "gluten free."
What? 2 things I did not know would be in a realtor's arsenal.
Gluten-free house. Yes.
Gluten-free. Wow. I'm not sure what is the selling feature there besides hanging on the buzzword? That
seems like I think it will get people interested to.
You get you thinking.
Yeah.
I want to see the house. I want to see what a gluten-free house looks like.
I'll prove it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's, we have a great city, right? Like, I think, one of the things that I've marveled at is like, our volunteer base. Like, anybody that's ever ran a major event in our city walks away saying, I cannot believe how many people come out of the woodwork to, golf tournaments or various things, being ball spotters, to being, it's amazing, right? We're just we're a powerful community when we come together. We really are.
Turner, who's behind the camera here doing the producing, became friends with some international students over the last couple of years, and they were all headed home to Spain and Italy and Germany here last weekend, and really sad about leaving. And you ask them, like seriously, like, you're going back to Rome and Florence, Madrid, like, how could you be upset about leaving Medicine Hat? Yep. The people. Yep. They just really loved how friendly the people were and how connected they were, and so it sometimes takes that stranger to give you that perspective that you don't always have when you're in it.
100%, right? The example I'd give is the Calgary Stampede. You know how many people in Calgary don't go to the Calgary Stampede? That's their weekend to leave town, unless they have company come to town, because they really kind of go, you realize how good this is? You're like, yeah, maybe I should have pancakes and do the thing, right? And yeah, it takes that outside perspective sometimes for us to, like, we are so accustomed to the way Medicine Hat is that we forget what some of the strengths are to it, right? And yeah, the people are amazing. It is just a great community. Like I said, it's a great size. The fact that, honestly, in most cases, feels 6 degrees of separation. In Medicine Hat, it's like 2.5, right? Like, you're always a phone call or a couple texts away from finding someone that has the answer or can help or can connect you. It's a great size city, and it is great people. It really is. Yeah.
What's What's next for you?
Oh boy, what's next for me? I'm going to keep going in the realm I'm going. I'm really happy with the next step in that sort of speaking and coaching scenario. It works well for me. It fits for my lifestyle moving forward, the way my family and kids are now. I see myself going a lot more in that direction. I see myself being, even more and more passionate now that I have more time and energy in that mental health side, and really trying to make sure that we catch people before they fall through the cracks, right? In those scenarios. So that's where I see myself digging a lot more is in that side of the equation. People have bantered around the idea of, am I going to write a book or various things like that? Yeah, the idea has crossed my mind. Again, being a horrible speller, it's not totally something I'm cool with. But again, there's technologies and proofreaders,
ghostwriters.
There's things for that. But you know what? It comes back to that accepting that we have skills, right? And I'm comfortable being able to elaborate my skills speaking, but I'm not totally comfortable writing my skills. You know what I mean? Or sharing. I just don't feel like that's something I'm really good at. And I know that I need to come to some acceptance with that, because I wrote freelance column writing for like 17 years. I know I can write.
Yeah, you've done a lot more writing than a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah. I've done a lot more writing. I can clearly get the message across. But it's just embracing that. I don't know if I've totally embraced the idea of author. So that would maybe be something down the line. But, the speaking and coaching is the area that I really see myself continuing to push into. It's just such an important thing for me, but also for our community and for the people around us. And it's just a timely thing, right? We're getting into a world where our medical system is struggling to keep up, especially on the mental health side, which is where, the access to coaching and those things is just so much more important, because they help fill the gaps in that situation sometimes. And so I just see a big need for that. And that's an area I really want to continue to push forward on. Yeah.
Where do people find you?
Online, trevormoore.ca is my website. You can catch me on various social medias, LinkedIn, Trevor Douglas Moore, on Facebook, Trevor Douglas Moore, Instagram, Trevor Douglas Moore. But yeah, trevormoore.ca is the website. That's where all the real cool information is.
One last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Who, if in a podcast that's about Medicine Hat and identity, who do I need to interview next? Who would, of all the people out there?
All the people,
and they could be people who are here now or people who were here.
We had a bit of this conversation when we connected about this. And obviously, as you'd mentioned, Trevor Linden is one that jumps to your mind right away, but he's too obvious. Naturally, he's just such a great guy and great family from the city. Who else do you need to talk to? You know what? One of the people that I've had a great pleasure to speak with was Malcolm Systems with IXL, giving some of the history of IXL and the bricks throughout our community and how it's really created the thumbprint, if you will, for Medicine Hat. And it was a really fascinating conversation. So he'd be a great one, because there's so much history. And I love the imagery of, building the foundation of Medicine Hat, really one brick at a time, right? Like both physically and just as an analogy. But
Systems have been here for
a huge part. Even if you go to the airport, you see all the pictures along walking down the tunnelway, you see all the different pictures of them. But IXL's been a big part of our community for forever, right? And you take it for granted, but when people come from out of town, they walk downtown, they talk about all the brick. Yeah. It's like, that's IXL. They were critical in building a big part of this community, both physically and.
All right. Well, that's a cool lead. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, Malcolm Systems, be a great guy.
Right. Well, thanks, Trev. Trying to keep it relatively contained, short and sweet, and
awesome.
Get to the heart of it. I hope that's
good.
What you thought it would be.
It was fun. Absolutely. Absolutely. I always love podcasts, right? They're always so fun. You just never know where the conversations are going to go, and they flow. And
I didn't know we'd be talking about bears.
Exactly. Right. I didn't know I'd be talking about colorblindness. But here we are.
Motivation Local is produced by Table 4 Productions with the generous support of TELUS Story Hive. You can find our episodes on Optic TV, at our website, motivationlocal.com, on our YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer is Turner Sadlemyer. Our theme music was composed by Medicine Hat musical artist Snakes and the Riot. As always, thanks for watching or listening to our podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard here, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel or to leave us some feedback.